Welcome to Exit to Excel, the podcast for anyone who's heard the words, thank you, but your services are no longer needed. This is a podcast where we transform career setbacks into opportunities with practical advice and the positive energy that you need to move forward. Every week, we're going to do a deep dive into the real challenges of career transitions and give you tools that actually work. Now, if you're listening to this, you're probably like me and the 3.5 million people who have been impacted by a layoff so far this year. Or you know someone who's been impacted, or you're seeing signs and you're concerned that you may be laid off yourself. Layoffs are more than just a career setback. They are deeply personal, and they shake your confidence, they shake your sense of stability, and even your identity. I know because I've been on both sides of the layoff conversation. As an HR professional who's been working in HR for over 20 years, I have personally experienced layoffs myself, my most recent layoff being this past October, and I've also laid off thousands of people over the course of my career. So whether you just received the news recently or it's been a few months and you're still grappling with it, or you're seeing signs and you just want to better prepare, this is the place and this is the space for you, a place for truth, tools, and real transformation. Now, I know there are other career podcasts out there, but I'm going to tell you what makes this one different. One is, as I've mentioned, I've been on both sides of the table, both sides of the layoff conversation. I've been the person getting that news that my services were no longer needed 4 times. And I've also been the HR business partner working with organizations and leaders to deliver that same news to thousands of people. And this dual perspective has taught me things that most people in this space have never experienced or that they completely miss. Now, the second thing that makes this thing different is that I'm going to be your secret weapon, your HR secret weapon. I'm going to be your off the record HR business partner. We're going to be unapologetic. We're going to be unfiltered. And I'm going to give it with unwavering compassion because I know how it is. I'm going to share with you the things that are off the record that your own HR manager can't share with you or even your manager. I'm not going to sugarcoat the things that are hard or pretend that positive thinking is the only thing you need to get through. But I'm also not going to let you get, stuck and just stick in victim mode. We're going to face the reality of your situation head on and then build a strategy to move forward together. So, to that end, I am so excited to introduce something that's going to be a regular part of this Exit to Excel podcast, a segment that I'm calling ASKLT No Appointment Needed. Now, although my name is LeTonya, that's LE most people don't remember it. They call me LeTonya, or they just don't get it right. They call me something else. So since we're going to be real close, I want you to call me LT. So this segment is going to be called Ask LT, No Appointment Needed. And that is where you can come to me and ask me the questions that you don't feel comfortable asking your HR manager or your manager about things related to your career. So it's almost like, when you are leaving a company and they ask you to fill out an exit survey and you ask questions, you provide feedback, but then nothing really ever changes. Or you're in these companies, they ask you to, hey, complete this employee engagement survey. We want to know how satisfied you are. We want to get your feedback on how we make things better. You do it and it just goes into a dark hole and you don't hear anything back. Well, for this, I'm going to give you the answers you're looking for and the answer that you deserve. So this is how it's going to work. I want you to submit your questions, your story, or your situation to my email at exit2excel@gmail.com and put in the subject Ask LT. Also on my social media, on Instagram and on TikTok. In the comments, put hashtag Ask LT and ask your question. and we will get back to you. Now, this is what I'm going to do because I'm very excited about this. Every week, I'm going to pick 5 questions that I've received to answer in the podcast. At the end of each month, I'm going to submit all those inquiries into a drawing, and I'm going to pick 5 people to do a free 15-minute consultation with me. So ask those questions. Now, of course, there are some things that maybe you want to maintain your anonymity or some things that are rather sensitive in nature. Then email those questions to me directly if you don't want to post on social media. But send me your questions. I'm anxious to help you out and get started. And this is where you're going to get the truth that HR won't tell you. So let's get into it. Maybe you've heard that we're eliminating your position. Maybe you saw the signs coming, or you see the signs coming, you're trying to get ahead of it. Whatever brought you here, I want you to know something right out the gate. You are not alone. And this isn't the end of your story. In fact, this could very well be the beginning of the best chapter of your career. Now, I know that might be hard to believe right now, especially with things being so unpredictable right now. You look at the news and there's, talk of a, potential recession. You hear time after time about companies laying off. You hear about people who've been looking for jobs for months on end and submitting over 100 applications and resumes. I get it, but I'm going to share with you hopefully some techniques and tools that will help you navigate through all the craziness. Now, I remember back in 2007, that's when I had my first layoff. And like most large companies, the signs are kind of out there. The company had actually announced that they were going to have to lay off tens of thousands of staff due to one of their blockbuster drugs having been found to cause heart attacks. And the HR department was working with the other departments and functions to identify the people that they were going to lay off. Well, then it came up for HR. And I remember those weeks when all the HR leaders were going into a room for hours on end to have these discussions and make these decisions. So it's almost like playing a lottery, like, hey, I'm going to play, but I know I'm not going to win. It's almost like, layoff is the same. You kind of see these things happening around you, but you never believe it's going to happen to you until it does. So I remember sitting in my office and my manager sitting across from me with his folder. They always sitting across from you with a folder, by the way, most of the time. And he's saying, hey, due to blah, 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 we're eliminating your position, blah, blah, blah. So I found it so ironic that here I had spent months on end working with the managers in this same organization to, prepare scripts for them to have the conversation. I've been the one coaching the managers on how to deliver the news with compassion. And now here I am on the other side of the table receiving the news. I honestly felt like at that time that my HR career was over and my world was crumbling. And I remember, he's sitting across from me and he's like, well, hey, take the rest of the week off. Really? Take the rest of the week off. And I remember I literally wanted to walk through the building like this because I was so embarrassed. I felt like I was the only one out of this 500 plus HR organization that had been let go. So here's what I didn't know in that moment, though, that what I've come to learn over the next 20 years. What you do from that time that you're being notified and for the next 48 hours can determine whether this is the worst part of your career, the worst thing could have happened in your career, or the catalyst for something amazing. And so that's why I created what I call the first 48 framework, the F48. Between the mistakes that I have personally made and also seeing the mistakes that others have made, I've seen it all. I've seen emotions driving decisions. I've seen high levels of disrespect, things posted on social media, applying for hundreds of jobs with no kind of strategy, signing severance agreements without really understanding what's being agreed to, just sending out mass emails to your network, bashing the company or people. I've seen it all. And these mistakes and observations have taught me something invaluable. They showed me exactly what you should and should not do in those first 48 hours. And over the next 15 years, as I was laid off 3 more times and helped hundreds of others navigate their own layoffs and transitions, I've been able to refine this into what I call the F48 framework, the first 48 hours framework. And this framework, the critical first 48 hours, is what I'm talking about today. Because when you're able to get those first 48 hours right, everything else becomes easier and much better to navigate. So in today's episode, that's what we're talking about, the first 48, those critical 48 hours after a layoff. It's the most emotionally charged window, and it's also the most important one to handle wisely. So by the end of this conversation, you'll know, one, the 5 things you absolutely must do before you leave the building or before you leave that conversation, because some of these conversations are taking place over a video call, like mine did back in October. 2, you're going to learn how to handle that severance conversation like a pro, even when you're in shock, either, the severance or the layoff notification. You're going to learn the biggest mistakes that 90% of the people make in their first 2 days and also how to avoid them. You're going to learn how to set yourself up faster for a more successful job search starting from day 1. And then finally, you're going to learn why these first 48 hours literally determine how the next 6 months of your life will go. Now, I've created something special for all of you, and it's called the E2E Exit Checklist. And this isn't the exit checklist that you're going to receive from your company. This is the checklist that is going to give you the information that you need to position yourself well after the exit and give you the information that you really need that will lead to a successful transition. So we're going to talk more about that checklist later on. But first, let's talk about why these 48 hours matter and dive into the first 48 framework. Okay. Let's say you're sitting in that conference room, you're sitting on that video call, and you've heard the words that your position is being eliminated. You need to know what to do next at that moment. Now, the first 48 framework is built upon 3 core principles that I learned the hard way. The first one is focus. You need to stay focused despite the emotional chaos and upheaval. Second, facts. You need to gather all the facts and documentation before you make any decisions. And then thirdly, the foundation. You need to go ahead and build a strong foundation for your next chapter, starting from that very first hour. So we're going to go ahead and break those down. The first hour happens before you leave the building or before you get off that call. And this is where most people go completely wrong. I mean, your emotions are running high, you go blank, you're in shock, and your first instinct is probably just to get out of that conversation as quickly as possible, like getting off the call, getting out the room and getting out the building. That's usually our first instinct. But I urge you to resist that, because this first hour is the most important opportunity you have to gather your information and also protect your interest. So the first step is get everything in writing. Do not, and I cannot stress enough, do not just nod and walk away, as I have in many of those situations. Like even in the first one, they're just talking. And I'm like, yes. Do you understand? Yes. Mm-hmm. Because I couldn't think. I mean, I just can't think. And even in my last one, well, I would say in my last one, I asked questions. I knew what to ask. I've been through so many times. I'm like, well, look, what about this? And what about this? And what about this? Right? But there were still some key things that I didn't ask about that now I wish I had. But anyway, You want to get as much as you can in writing and ask for written confirmation for everything that was discussed. That's everything from your last day, the last day you're on payroll, if you get any severance, your benefits timeline, all of it. Now, if they say, "Oh, we're going to send you an email," then you'd be like, "Okay, well, when can I expect that email? Like, is it going to be like within 24 hours? If it's going to be whenever?" Get that commitment. And if you do not receive that communication within that timely manner, then you will want to follow up pretty earnestly because that is information that you need to move forward. So again, make sure you get that commitment and that writing in the very beginning. Step two, understand your timeline is so important. So a lot of times when you're notified of a layoff, most oftentimes, when you're notified, that is considered maybe your last working day. You're going to get a notice period. That notice period will either be with you working or it will be with you not working, which is called a non-working notice period, and you're paid through that still on payroll. You'll want to understand how all of that is going to work. How long does your health insurance go for? When does it end? What is the timeline for your severance? When do you have to get your paperwork back? How do you return your computer, your company property? Was a timeline for that? These aren't just logistics, they're crucial planning information. So understand your timeline. Step three, secure your references. Now, most of the time you aren't thinking about references when somebody has told you, "Thank you, but your services are no longer needed." But I think it's important to ask, how will your references be handled and how or who do you direct those inquiries to? Most companies will only provide your position and your years of service. There's been some pretty slippery slopes in the past where if companies provide less or more, it could be seen as, being damaging to your transition. So to play it safe, most companies are only going to give you that. However, your manager, and most managers do, will agree to give you a personal recommendation. They can't give it on behalf of the company, but they can give it as a personal recommendation as someone who has worked directly with you. So if you're in this meeting with your manager or with HR, one, I would ask them, how is the company reference going to be handled? And I would ask your manager then, "Hey, do you mind if I reach out to you or if I provide you as a reference?" And most will say yes. But even beyond the reference, to just talk about your work, ask people for a LinkedIn endorsement and recommendation. Ask them then, because at that point, they're probably going to feel sorry for you, right? Because these these meetings are very difficult. But you want it while it's fresh in people's minds. And your manager is going to be the one who can, most attest to your character, your work, your contributions, your achievements. So go ahead and ask for those things right in the meeting. Your reference, how your reference is going to be handled, and those LinkedIn endorsements and recommendations. Next, gather your personal information. You want to immediately get your personal files off your work computer. Even though we're not supposed to do it, we all do. Get all that stuff off your personal computer. Export your personal contacts. And if you can, grab any of your performance reviews and commendations that belong to you. And be smart about it, because there are a lot of companies like mine that are very strict about things that you can take and download off your computer. So only take what's legally yours and do it professionally. But a word to those who have not yet been impacted, you want to go ahead and start getting those things ahead of time before this happens, because just like in my last layoff, even though I sensed it was coming, I didn't do the preparation. The time just got away from me. And so I thought, and again, not clarifying my timeline, I thought I was going to have access to my computer, my files, until the next week or the following week when my non-working notice period ended. But they turned off my access like within the next few hours, and I couldn't get anything. None of my stuff I had. The emails, congratulating me for doing a great job, my certificates, I didn't have access to any of that stuff. So get those things while you can. And again, if your work you have been notified, go ahead and start getting that stuff now. Step 5 is stay professional. I know it's hard because oftentimes you feel angry, you feel betrayed, you feel scared, and all of this is normal. But resist the urge to vent in this moment. Thank them for the opportunity. And yes, thank them and ask them about next steps, because how you handle this moment is what people are going to remember about you. You could have been a superstar, you could have done all these things, but if you are cursing and blessing people out and knocking things off the tables, which I've seen it, that's what people are going to remember about you. So you have to remember that this is a small world and you never know how paths may cross. So it's always important to stay professional during the process. So these first 5 steps, again, this is what I call focus, and it's about staying focused and, focusing on what you can control despite the emotional chaos. So let's talk about after you leave the building, after you get off the call, hours 2 through 6, the strategic assessment, which is the facts phase. Once you're home, that's when the real work begins. And to be honest with you, a lot of us go into panic mode, and all we want to do is start reaching out to people and reaching out to our network and start applying for jobs. Don't do that, because one, you're just going to be, as we call it, spraying and praying, just kind of blindfolding, just trying to just hit anything, just hoping for anything. You don't want to do that, because one, you're probably not going to get any results. And it is going to be even more frustrating and devastating and stressful when you do that. And you're going to be operating off of emotion, and that leads to bad decisions. So avoid doing that. Here's what I want you to do instead. One, go ahead and review all the documentation that you've received. If you have a copy of the handbook, if you have a copy of your employment contract, any non-compete agreements you have, read through your severance agreement very carefully. And I mean very carefully, line by line. Do not, and I repeat, do not sign anything immediately. You need to go through it. If you're getting a severance agreement, you will have anywhere from typically 21 to 45 days to review it. And depending on the situation, they will advise you to have an attorney review it as well, which I think you should too, depending on the circumstance. We'll talk about that. But you'll want to make sure that you get everything together and make sure you understand it and outline your questions if you have any. The second thing you want to do is assess your financial situation. Now, let's be honest. Most of us are working because we have to. We work for the money and the benefits. We need that. So a lot of the stress comes from no longer having that income. So you'll want to go ahead and assess your financial situation. Calculate your monthly expenses, all of them. Figure out how long your severance is and how long it will last. Check on your unemployment. Unemployment is different for every state. Check and see what the rules are. Look at your 401k options. Review your health insurance choices. Now, I know sometimes we just want to avoid it. We want to dig our head in the sand. It can be overwhelming, but the more that you have a clear picture of your financial runway, the better you are able to, manage your job search strategy. If you have 6 months of expenses covered, then you can be a little bit more strategic. If you only have 6 weeks, then you need to be aggressive. So either way is fine. You just need to know which runway you are on. And that starts with understanding the situation, the financial situation that you're in. Now, the next thing you'll want to do is plan your communication strategy. How do you want to explain this to your network, right? LinkedIn is probably the most popular platform that we have for our professional updates and such networking. So go ahead and draft your LinkedIn announcement, but don't post it yet. I just want you to start thinking about it and decide who you need to tell personally versus who you're going to communicate to through social media. And you'll want to think about how you want to frame the story. Review it with your closest friends and confidant and bounce ideas off of them to see what they think. But again, you'll want to go ahead and start thinking about it because at some point you will want to communicate to your friends and family and to your network what your situation is. Now, hours 10 through 24, this is where we're going to take control, set the foundation. This is the second day, so you should be moving from reactive to proactive. This is where you start taking control of the narrative and your next steps. So again, setting the foundation, the third F of the F48. Here's something that most career advice people miss, even though maybe not so much, because I think we're talking about a lot more, which is a great thing. That is your physical and mental well-being, because it absolutely impacts your job search success. It isn't about just feeling better, even though that matters too. It's about performing better. It's about showing up as the best, awesome self that you are. When you're physically active, when you're socially connected, and you're mentally sharp, you just tend to interview better, you have good energy, you network more effectively, and you make better decisions. So I would say this is where you need to start building that foundation, building your well-being foundation. This is where most people go wrong because they automatically want to go to applying for job applications and reaching out to people, but they're ignoring the fact that you have these stress hormones that are raging and you're in a crazy emotional state. Don't make that mistake. So the first thing I want you to do is commit to daily physical activity. I don't care if it's a 20-minute walk around the block, a 20-minute walk around Walmart. Movement is medicine. Science shows it. And it's especially helpful when you are dealing with the stress of job loss. Your body affects your mind, and your mind affects your job search performance. He hasn't made his appearance here, but I got a dog last year, and I'm out with him 2 and 3 times a day, and it forces me to, one, get my physical activity in, but it also forces me to be social because people ask about him and that kind of thing. And during these 6 months I haven't been working, it's been the best thing ever because quite honestly, I probably wouldn't leave the apartment if I didn't have to outside of, running errands and doing whatever. But being able to get outside, get some fresh air, get the sunshine has just been remarkable. So first thing is daily physical activity. The second thing is stay socially connected. And I don't mean just on social media. And quite honestly, you might want to think about being a little bit more protective and selective about the social media you're consuming because that can absolutely, be damaging to your psyche. So what I mean by being socially connected is socialize with people. Socialize with people in person. That's the best thing, right? Text or call a person every day, schedule coffee with friends, join a networking group or volunteer somewhere because the people who tend to bounce back the fastest are the ones who stay connected. If you're listening to this and you're not impacted, but you know someone who has, do me a favor and reach out to them because it's such a lonely place. You'd almost think that when you get laid off, you got the cooties or something. Can I say that? Cooties? You would think that because it's like no one wants to touch you or associate with you. It's just amazing how people just disappear out of your space. So reach out to that person, just check in, ask them how they're doing, ask them is there anything you can do to help them on their journey because trust me, it can mean a world of difference for that person. Thirdly, manage your mindset intentionally. Again, it can be devastating when you've been let go from a job, especially if you didn't see it coming. But there's something that we can all be thankful for every single day. So practice gratitude daily. And I know that may sound cheesy when you've been laid off, but hear me out. Gratitude literally rewires your brain for resilience, and it helps you see opportunities instead of just the obstacles. I have this little pad that I purchased some time ago, and it says at the top, "You've got this." So every day I look at it. It actually also has a place for me to write down what I'm grateful for. And by me being focused on that, even if it's just for 5 or 10 minutes a day, it's like, you know what? I do have something to be grateful for. And I tell people all the time because a lot of times with being let go, there's so much anger and bitterness towards the organization that let you go or the person that you feel like let you go. Instead of being angry or bitter, thank them for the number of years that you had paying benefits. You were able to support yourself and your family. Thank them for probably having a higher salary coming out than you did going in. Thank them for having a higher skill set that now will hopefully parlay into an even better experience. Be grateful because, as they say, the what blessings go up, blessings come down. It's the same thing. So be gracious. Um, and also, reframe the experience. Again, this isn't a career punishment, it's a career pivot preparation. The company that let you go, they just made room for something better. I've seen this happen so many times, even in my own situation. For the past 6 or 7 months, I've been laid off. It's been such a blessing because I feel like my mind and my world has been open to opportunities that otherwise I hadn't thought of before. So I don't see it as, my job firing me. I saw that they set me free. And it could be the same thing for you. So think about how you're talking to yourself and reframe your experience into one that will be even better going forward. Now, starting your strategic planning. Now you can go ahead and start thinking strategically about how you're going to go about your job search, identifying your ideal companies and roles, thinking about your networking approach, planning your timeline. But again, I don't want you to start applying randomly because you're still in planning mode. This is when you'll want to craft your story about your layoff. People will ask, well, how do I explain how was, about my layoff? Be honest. Just tell them, hey, my company went through a reorg or there was a loss of business and they had to, protect revenue, whatever the case may be. Just be honest. And look, as much as this is in the news and as many people that are out in the job market right now for no fault of their own is not anything that's unknown or to be ashamed of. So just be honest. But practice what you're going to say. Practice out loud until it feels natural and positive. You can say something like, well, my position was eliminated as part of a restructuring, and this has given me the opportunity to explore roles that are even better fit for my skills and interests. There are many ways that you can frame it so that it's not like you are, discarded unwanted goods anymore. The next thing is consider professional help. Now, if you are receiving a severance payment that is substantial, or if there are complex non-compete issues, then it might be good to consult with an employment attorney or financial advisor. And even though it's going to cost you some money up front, it may save you thousands in the end. Also, and I know a lot of people have questions about this, if you feel like you were unfairly let go of, then I would also advise that you consult with an attorney before you sign anything. Now, I'm not an attorney, but I've worked with plenty of them, and I've also, been involved with certain situations and cases. So again, if you have questions, if you have documentation, then it doesn't hurt to consult with an attorney just to see what they will say. So by all means, consult with an attorney if you need to. Also consider if you need support for your mental health. And there's no shame in talking to a counselor during transition. I know a lot about placement services or severance benefits also include access to counselors and therapists. Take advantage of those, especially if you don't have to pay for it, right? Um, just do it. And it can, in fact, be one of the smartest investments that you make for your future success. So that is the first 48 framework in action, your focus, your facts and foundation. the roadmap for the first 48 hours that sets you up for success and everything that follows. So when you take care of the logistics as well as your well-being, and when you approach this strategically and maintain a positive mindset, you don't just survive a layoff, you can use it as a launching pad for something better. Okay, now that we've gone through the framework, let's dig a little bit deeper into some of the legal insights and red flags. So I'm going to share some insights that I've learned with working with employment attorneys over the years, plus some red flags I've seen in some separations and separation agreements that I've seen that cost people money or opportunities. And this is part of the facts phase of the F48, making sure you understand what you're really dealing with. So if you are fortunate to get a severance agreement, one, good for you. And understand that a severance agreement isn't just about money. The company is offering you severance in exchange for something else. So you'll want to know what you are going to be obligated on the hook for by signing that agreement. And it could be something that affects your future opportunities. And despite this being a legal contract by which you're going to be bound by certain things, a lot of people sign it without really understanding what they're agreeing to. So the first red flag to look out for are overly broad non-compete clauses. And these typically prevent you from securing employment with other companies like, current clients, competitions, or whatever. Now, I know legally, the law has kind of gone after companies for having these type clauses, and they've been found to be non-binding, but you still want to know what it is in the agreement that you are agreeing to. And if it's something that you don't agree to, you have questions about, one, if you have questions about it, I would definitely get clarification before you sign it. And then secondly, if it's something you don't agree to, then you negotiate on it, right? Things to look out for are geographical restrictions that seem unreasonable for your role, time periods that are longer than the industry standard, definitions of competition that are too vague. A software developer shouldn't be prevented from working at a tech company just because the company you work for is a client of theirs, right? So again, you'll want to make sure that you read that fine print very well and understand what those things are and ask for amendments if needed. And that's where an attorney can be very helpful in that. Red flag number 2, unclear payment terms. I've seen agreements that say the severance will be paid following standard payroll procedures. Well, what does that mean? And when does that start? So again, you'll want to understand what that is before you sign the agreement. There are also clauses where payments can stop if you start or find new employment. There are vague language about tax withholdings that left people with unexpected, tax bills. Again, this is where you'll want to read through with the fine print, understand what you're signing up for. 3, reference policy traps. Now, we talked about references a little bit earlier, and I don't know that I'm aware of many agreements that specifically mention references, but if it does, make sure you understand what it is and that you understand what information can be shared about you. Some clauses limit references to dates of employment and final salary, and those things can actually hurt you in your job search. So again, make sure you understand the language that's in there about references, and ideally you'll just be able to secure personal references from the people that have worked, more closely with you that won't necessarily be providing information on behalf of the company. Now, when might you need legal help? You don't necessarily need a lawyer for severance agreements, but there are situations where it may be worth the investment. So again, as I mentioned, if you have a substantial severance agreement, and that would be anything that's going to be, worth more than 6 months' salary. 2, if you have complex stock options or equity arrangements. 3, if you have any concerns about the non-compete or non-disclosure terms. 4, if you suspect discrimination or retaliation was involved. And then 5, if there are any industry specific restrictions, particularly in healthcare, which I've seen before. And those also tend to occur also in finance and technology. Those are things that it will probably be good to consult with an attorney on. Now, you don't have to be an attorney to ask, smart questions as it relates to your separation or transition or agreements. And so here is some questions that you can get some pretty valuable information that might can help you. One is this the standard severance package for the company at my level? What's the typical time frame for a person to review this and get back to you? Can you clarify what this clause means in practical terms? And who should I contact for questions during my review period? Those are very good, solid questions, and one that they should have no problem providing you with the information. Now, even if you choose not to hire an attorney, it would still be good to have someone knowledgeable review your agreement. And this could be someone that you trust who's been involved in layoffs, a career counselor, or even, an HR friend. Have them review it and see if, any red flags come up for them, and they can guide you into, hey, yeah, this looks fine, it's standard, go inside. Like, no, I don't know about this. You might want to look at this a little bit more. But again, you have typically 21 to 45 days to sign it. Take that time. Don't feel pressured. Make sure you feel completely comfortable with it before you sign anything. Now, common mistakes and success stories. I'm going to share some examples of how people have handled those first 48 hours and share with you some of the mistakes to avoid and some success stories that may inspire you. And these examples will show you clearly what happens when people don't follow the first 48 framework system and what's possible when they do. So one is the emotional social media explosion. There was a person, a talented project manager who got laid off during a company restructuring. It didn't have anything to do with performance. It's just that, that role was identified as not being needed. And so she was so angry because she felt like the company and her manager, quite frankly, had lied to her about the layoffs. And so within 2 hours of her exit, she did this big rant on LinkedIn about how the company had treated its loyal employees and how it had no integrity or whatever. Well, later down the road, about 6 months, as she's interviewing for a role, the person she's interviewing with saw that post that she did and asked her about it, and she really didn't have a response. And so she didn't get the job. Now, that may not be the only reason that she got the job, but you can best believe that it didn't shine her in the best of light. So again, the lesson, she skipped the focus phase of the first 48. Always wait 48 hours before you post anything about your layoff on social media. Because when you do post, you want to be able to focus on your future and not your frustrations. A second thing or second mistake that happens is the application tsunami. People want to get home and they want to spend 6-8 hours a day sending out applications. And again, it's already frustrating and draining as it is when you are strategic. But when you put forth that much energy that early on into that process and you're not getting anything back, it is wearing, it is fatiguing. So you don't want to skip, the facts and the foundation of the first 48, because strategy is going to beat volume every single time. And it's best to apply for 5 jobs that you've thoroughly vetted out, that you've thoroughly prepared for, versus spraying and praying about 50 jobs that you've applied for just at random. Okay. Now, on the flip side, in terms of success stories that I've seen, One is where a person came back and was able to negotiate more severance. Now, I will say I tried that in my last one, it didn't work, but I was also aware that this was part of a larger restructuring program, and there was indeed a need to be consistent. However, it doesn't hurt to ask. And so I have seen situations where, a person was laid off, particularly if maybe you relocated for a job, or maybe you took on a different role and it didn't work out. Sometimes, depending, you can get a little bit more severance based on the circumstances. So I would just say, hey, make your case, talk to the right people, and see what happens. Like I said, I have seen some situations where people, they went through it, they went through their severance agreement, they took it, they didn't sign it right then, took it home, they went through it, they had questions about this, they had questions about that, they had questions about their circumstances, they went back, they talked to the right people, they were able to get a little bit more severance. So again, it can happen, but you'll just need to go through it and be aware of maybe what you can ask for. Okay, so now that we've gone through all of that, thank you for hanging out with me. Now I want to share something really valuable with you. I did mention at the very beginning that I created this Exit to Excel exit checklist to help people transitioning from jobs, to give you the tools and the information that you need for a successful transition. And I want to share it with you because I truly believe that it can save you a lot of time and stress. Now, this isn't your normal exit checklist that you'll find in your company or even online. This is something that I created and developed based on, as I mentioned, my experience of, managing so many notifications and transitions, and also being on the receiving end of this. So I do, know that this gives you complete control of the entire situation so that no stone is unturned. So we're going to offer this checklist. As I mentioned, send an email to exit2excel@gmail.com. Put in the subject line E2E checklist, and we're going to send it to you. Again, how you're going to use it is going to be framed in the three sections: focus, facts, and foundation. Follow them in order, and I guarantee it'll make you feel a lot more comfortable about how you're going about things. So thank you for hanging out with me on the first 48. Next week, we're diving into the layoff conversation, both sides of the desk. And I'm going to share with you what really goes on the weeks and months prior to terminations that take place, what goes on in the room, and why the meeting takes place the way that it does, why maybe your manager who you've worked with for years acts like they don't even know you anymore, and HR tends to behave in the same manner. There is a method to the madness, believe it or not. We're going to cover the real reasons behind the corporate language that is used, questions you can ask that will get you valuable information, and again, how to handle the conversation so that it protects your interest and maintains your personal and professional relationships. And then we're going to have the first Ask LT segment where I'm going to answer some of your questions and address some of your scenarios. So what I want you to do this week, every week you're going to have a challenge, right? Your challenge this week is simple. Request the exit checklist. Again, whether you just got notified, you've been in the process for a little bit, or you are anticipating. I think it's particularly helpful if you are anticipating it, because in that way you kind of know ahead of time what you need to be asking for. Send me an email, exit2excel@gmail.com. Put in the subject line E2E Exit Checklist, and we'll get that to you. And go ahead and go through it. Get back to me on my social media, on TikTok, on Instagram, exit2excel.com, with your feedback, your comments, your thoughts, and let me know. And remember, a layoff isn't the end of your story. It isn't even the end of a chapter. It's just a plot twist to something that is probably going to lead to something even better. Trust me, I know. I believe in your ability to survive this transition. I believe in your ability to thrive in it. You have more strength, more skills, and more resilience than you probably realize right now. So thank you for spending time with me. I'm LeTonya, aka LT, with Rocky, signing off, and hope to see you next Friday. Take care.